Good afternoon. I'm Barbara Lark, Chief of Security for Buffalo Public Schools. Today we're going to talk about active shooter, active threat awareness. I have the pleasure of working with Dana Estrada to present this information to you today. Dana?
Good afternoon. Dana Estrada, Director of Border Community Service of Niagara University, and we operate a free emergency preparedness program in the city of Buffalo. So today the topic will be active shooter, active threat awareness, with highlighting some things that schools may need to know. By the end of this session, you will be able to describe actions to take when confronted with an active shooter, recognize potential threat indicators, describe actions to take to prevent and prepare for potential active shooter incidents, and describe actions to take when law enforcement arrive on scene. Please remember that not all recommendations will be applicable at every location. This information is intended to provide guidance and will require individuals and organizations to plan for themselves. Familiarize yourself with your organizational policy and your specific building plans. Preparedness and awareness are the keys to helping protect students, employees, visitors, and ourselves. Most active shooter situations are unpredictable and evolve quickly, lasting only minutes. We all must prepare to deal with the situation until law enforcement arrives on scene. It will be very quick, but your immediate response will matter, and those first few minutes will make a difference. An active shooter is an individual actively engaged in killing or attempting to kill people in a confined space or other populated area. There is often no pattern to the selection of victims, meaning individuals may not be targeted, but groups may be. Active shooters usually will continue to move throughout a building or area until stopped by law enforcement, suicide, or other intervention. Other intervention could be a person or a group of people coming together to subdue the shooter or threat. So it's important to remember that an active shooter or a person engaged in active threat never just wakes up one day and decides to do it. There is planning involved. And what research has found is that people enter on a pathway to violence. And as a community member, as a friend or colleague or a family member, you may see points on this pathway to violence that would indicate somebody is going to do something. A teacher-student may notice something more readily than somebody at a store with a student. But it's important to notice all of those little things in someone heading down this pathway to violence. So what are the steps to the pathway to violence? Well, the first is usually grievance, a feeling of resentment over something believed to be wrong or unfair. It does not have to be, in anyone else's view, a true grievance or something that is unfair or unjust, but to that person it feels like it is something wrong or unfair. Ideation, it begins with an idea to do harm. So someone starts to have those feelings that they want to do something. That's usually where it ends, but somebody on the pathway to violence will continue to fixate on that idea of doing harm. And then the planning and research portion. Consideration of how they will carry out the violent intent. They will look for a location, a time, targets, and that will go through a process of, they'll think, okay, this is the place, and then they'll back off and think, well, this is a better place. So this is where they start to do that. They will also start to research weapons or groups of people, and that happens in the planning and research phase. Preparation, the will to develop or acquire the means and methods to engage in harm, and that's when they start to acquire their weapons, their skill. So somebody may start going and target shooting, surveillance. They will often visit the location. Most are familiar with the location where they plan to do their attack. But for surveillance, they will still surveil. So they will watch the building, they will watch the doors, they will make sure, notice which doors are open at what times of day. They will sometimes come into a space to see their exits out. All of that that preparation happens at that stage. And then implementation, move to carry out the violent plan. That is the day that it actually takes place. So possible warning signs that are observable would be observable grievances with threats and plans of retribution. Those people will say offhanded remarks. Don't come back here tomorrow because something may happen, or someday I'm going to get this place. Sudden and dramatic changes in personality. Somebody who is really boisterous and happy all the time suddenly becomes withdrawn. Increasingly erratic, unsafe, or aggressive. Again, the same. Someone who was really not an aggressive person now starts taking aggressive language or aggressive action. Hostile feelings of injustice or perceived wrongdoing, that grievance. Marginalization or distancing from friends, colleagues, or family. Changes in performance in work or school. Maybe a student who is really diligent suddenly is concerned with schoolwork, or they may start skipping classes. And financial difficulties or changes. Someone who is saying things about financial changes in their life. Some of these warning signs are warning signs also for big things that are happening, especially in teenagers' life, or home issues. But they're really important to be aware of. So what to do when you start to notice somebody who is is going down the pathway to violence, or maybe going down the pathway to violence and has some behavioral changes? There are teams of people at our state level, at our county level, at our city level, and at our school level that can conduct behavioral threat assessment. So what is that? It is a process designed to identify, analyze, and manage threats to prevent violence. The process is used to define prohibited concerning behaviors and a threshold for intervention, establish procedures that are followed for each assessment, create a central reporting mechanism, and determine the threshold for law enforcement intervention. Now, you may not be part of a behavioral threat assessment, but that doesn't mean that your information is not important. There always has to be a channel for you to be able to report those items that you're noticing in your students or colleagues or anyone that's in the community that you notice may be threatening to do something. For more information, you can look at the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency's website. They're part of Department of Homeland Security. Look for enhancing school safety using a threat assessment model. It provides a lot of good information. So what is a response to an active shooter or active threat situation? Well, there are a few different models that are used in the United States, but the one that the FBI, Department of Homeland Security, and Buffalo Police identify as our response for community members is run, hide, fight. So what does that mean? Well, in an active shooter situation, all involved persons should quickly determine the most reasonable way to protect yourself and students. So what are those recommended actions? Run. If there's an accessible escape path, attempt to evacuate the premises. That is your best option. 2, hide. If evacuation is not possible, find a place to hide where the active shooter is less likely to find you. And 3, fight. As a last resort, and if your life is in imminent danger, attempt to disrupt and or incapacitate the active shooter. We're going to now show you a video. It's a 5.5-minute video that puts all of these recommendations into action. It's readily available on YouTube, but it really shows a good response model if you're ever faced with one of these situations. Run. If you are outside of a classroom or it is safe to do so, and you notice there's an accessible escape path, attempt to evacuate the premises. Take into consideration those with mobility issues. When running, have an escape plan in mind. That means that everybody in every space that they spend time should take a few minutes to walk around and notice your exit areas. You're going to leave your belongings. There is no reason to have a purse, a backpack, anything like that on you if you have to run. Seconds matter. Help others if possible. And you can warn and prevent others from entering the area. So once you have left the area and gotten far enough away that the threat is no longer an immediate threat to you, you can tell people that they should not go into the area that the action is happening. If law enforcement is not on scene and you are at a safe distance away from the active shooter, call 911. Hide. If safe evacuation is not possible, find a place to hide that provides cover and concealment. And in a classroom, this is your most likely scenario. You're going to lock the door. Those few seconds matter, and studies have shown that active shooters, since they know they only have a few minutes, will be deterred by even a locked door. They will go and find a door that is open. If you cannot lock your door, blockade the door with heavy furniture or use a doorstop on the back side of your door. That will provide you some extra time. Close, cover, move away from windows that give location to the threat. So not necessarily your exterior windows, but doorway windows. Now, on a normal day, you may leave those open so you can see into the hallway. But in an active threat situation, you may need to cover the windows to the hallway. You're going to silence your cell phone. We suggest that you never turn off your cell phone because you may need to be getting messages out on your location, and you may be getting information in as to what you need to do. But remember, it needs to be completely silent, and even on vibrate, that can give your location away. Also, your cell phone, of course, will light up. Never ever have that in your hand when you're exiting the building. Put it in a pocket. And then remain quiet. Fight. Used as a last resort and only if you are in imminent danger. Attempt to disrupt and/or incapacitate the active shooter. You're going to act as aggressively as possible. Throw items and use improvised weapons, even a computer that you have. Work together to incapacitate the shooter and commit to your actions. If you give that person a second, if you flinch in your actions, you will give that person the notification that you are about to do something. So now we're going to go over a few terms that you will be familiar with, and we all should be familiar with, even if we're not working in the school. Shelter in place. This can be used for a weather, a non-specific bomb threat, or a social media threat, or an emergency that requires the building operations to pause. Shelter in place announcement should be made. Do not use code words. We want plain language when the shelter in place announcement is made. Students should report to or remain in their regularly scheduled class. Normal classroom routines should continue after that. 911 may need to be called. It's situationally dependent. You may activate building level response team to sweep common areas of the school. You must determine if an evacuation is necessary due to the conditions causing the shelter in place. And then an announcement will be made when the need for shelter in place is over. Lockout. Lockout is utilized when an emergency is taking place in the vicinity of the school. Lockout announcement should be made. Do not use code words. Use plain language. Exterior windows and doors should be secured. So if you have an open window, make sure that you shut and lock it. Outside activities are ended. Make sure those that are outside the school, on the playground, or even in a remote location, are notified. During a lockout, classes are continued. Limit entry to the building once lockout is initiated. Any entry into the building during lockout is on a one-on-one basis and only through the designated entrance. No students should be dismissed when lockout is in place. Keep them inside. An announcement will be made when the lockout is over. Lockdown. Lockdown is used when there is an imminent threat that exists within the building. Can be the threat of or the use of weapon, a social media threat, or a specific bomb threat. Lockdown announcement should be made. Do not use code words. If a lockdown announcement is not made but threat is heard, lock down. Do not investigate the threat. If you hear something that seems like it could be a violent interaction of some sort, continue your lockdown procedures. If safe to do so, call 911 and give as many details as possible, including the description of the person or persons and location, type of weapon, and if there are injuries. If students or staff are in common areas or visitors to your school, they must be moved to the closest room with a lockable door. Lock or barricade the classroom doors and have students sit on floor by wall outside of the view from the door. Remain out of sight and keep quiet. Please look at your classroom and determine where in your room students can be safely out of view. Take attendance within your room. Document last known locations of students assigned to respective classroom. Attend to any injuries that you have. Remain in room. Do not allow anyone to enter the room or areas where you are located. Maintain silence. Do not communicate to anyone outside the room unless it's a verified first responder. Do not pull the fire alarm or respond to a fire alarm unless there is a known fire. That fire alarm could draw people into the hallway. So only respond if you know that there is an actual fire in the building, and never pull a fire alarm for an active shooter or active threat. Do not answer classroom telephones. Do not respond to any announcements or other school-wide communications. Do not leave room or allow children to leave the room, even if you think the event or threat is over. All doors will be opened by the Buffalo Police Department and/or school administration. Please don't allow anyone out until they release you.
Thank you, Dana. I'd like to just emphasize a little bit about the lockdown and in the situation that there's a lockdown. When teachers go into your classrooms, you need to immediately start assessing your environment in your classroom to see what materials you can use to block the door in the event you need to. Desks and bins, totes are really good to put up against the door. Dana mentioned using a doorstop if you have one, to not allow entrance into the classroom by the person posing the threat to you. Now, as we know, teachers change classrooms. So anytime you leave your homeroom, you need to do the exact same thing when you enter that next classroom. You need to assess that room and see what the layout of that room is, where you could move yourself and your students if you needed to have a hiding space in that room, and what materials you could use to block the doors. When you're in the auditorium, when you're in a classroom, when you're in the gym, even in a restroom, you need to always be mindful of what safety precautions you can take in the event of an active shooter or an active threat. If students are outside of the classroom and you are not able to get to them, this is something that we're going to need principals, the administrators, and the teachers to constantly remind students. If a threat happens and you're separated from your class, if you're in the restroom, to stand on top of toilet seats so that if an active shooter were to look in the restroom, you would not be able to see your feet and know that you're in a particular stall and come in and do harm to the student. So just simple things like that could mean a matter of life and death. So we just have to get in the mindset of thinking, unfortunately, this is the time in the era that we're living in, and we're always on high alert, but we have to be mindful of any safety precautions that we can take wherever we are within the school building. You should immediately assess the situation when you walk into any room. And this is a good practice to start implementing in your day-to-day lives no matter where you go. But we're talking about schools in particular and how you can keep yourself and your students safe. Thank you.
Forethought and training are important to enable you to react appropriately if confronted with an active shooter or active threat situation. As these situations evolve quickly, you will need to decide rapidly what the safest course of action based on the scenario that is unfolding. When law enforcement arrives on scene, immediate purpose is to stop the active shooter. So they will go to the area where the shots were last heard or the suspect was last seen. Remember to try to remain calm and to calm the students in your classroom the best that you can. Put down any items in your hand and raise hands in the air. Avoid pointing, yelling, or screaming. Proceed in the direction from which law enforcement are arriving. So if they are coming down the hall toward you, you're going to have your hands up and you're going to go run right by them. If you have some information that you need to provide, don't stop. You can, as you're running by them, say the last time the person was seen was in the room to the right. But keep continuing to move through the building to your exit areas. After reaching a safe location or assembly point, all persons involved in the situation, and if you are in the building, you are involved in the situation, will be held there by law enforcement until the situation is under control. Not only that, but they will ask you what you've seen, what you've heard, and all of those things that are important. So what information to provide? When possible, provide the following information to law enforcement officers or 911 operators. The last location of the active shooter or active threat. The number of shooters. Physical description of the shooter or shooters. Number and type of weapons held by the shooter. If you don't know weapons, you can even bring it down to a very basic level. If it looks like something that would be in a cowboy, a Western film, then say that. If it looks like something that would belong in a 1920s movie, say that. They will be able to determine, or a G.I. Joe type weapon, they will be able to better determine. Also, let them know if you saw somebody with tactical gear, if they had a helmet or a vest on. Any information like that that you can provide. And then also provide the number of potential victims at the location. That information will help ambulance response and hospital response. Prepare. Even the unknown or unexpected can be prepared for. This can include surveying your surroundings when you enter buildings or areas. It doesn't have to change your whole life, but everyone should spend a minute or two looking around any new situation that they're in, or even old situations that you've never really noticed before. If you're at a concert, notice where your exit areas, a bar or restaurant. If you're at the shopping mall, your quickest way out. Notice things that may be out of place. Think about what you would do in an active shooter event or other emergency disaster. And please discuss those plans with your family and coworkers. Let them know what your plans are and how you can help them get plans if they don't have plans. Recognize indicators of potential violence and terrorism. In the school or schools in which you work, find out the emergency plans for the building, including the evacuation routes. Now remember that your fire evacuation route may not hold for an active shooter or active threat situation, so you will have to look for alternative exits. And also the method for reporting different types of emergencies, whether through announcements, alarms, text alerts, etc. How will someone let you know if you're arriving to a new building or location that something is happening there? Find out what action is needed for individuals with functional needs and disabilities, guests and visitors, including substitute teachers, and bilingual language needs. When you notice things that may be out of place, you must report them. You spend more time in that building than most people, so you will notice when things are out of place. If someone leaves a backpack in a place that is unusual for a backpack to be left, if someone has propped open a door to the exterior of the school, make sure that you close that door and report that it was open. Never, ever, ever go to your car. You're just running out to your car for a minute because you have to grab something. Never prop open a door and then come back in that way. Make sure that you're always going through the designated entrance areas. And as a reminder, if you see something, say something. Know the routines. Be alert and learn about your neighborhood and workplace. Understanding the routines of places you spend time will help you to identify things that are out of place. Again, if you notice that backpack out of the area, or if you know of a garbage can propped up under a window or something that would allow entrance into a window, please report that. Be aware of what is going on around you. Whether you're traveling, at work, at school, or at home, be on the lookout for suspicious activities. Take what you hear seriously. If you hear someone talk about plans to harm their community or another student, report it to law enforcement immediately if it's a direct threat. A direct threat indicates that it's a specific act, a designated time, a designated place. There are other types of threats too. An indirect threat could be vague, unclear. It may be somebody saying, someday I'm going to do something. A veiled threat strongly implies that threat or violence may happen, and a conditional threat is a type of threat, if this doesn't happen, I'm going to do this. All of those threats are very, very important, and even if someone in a classroom makes an offhanded comment about wanting to cause harm to someone or the building, that needs to be reported to your building team, because you may have heard it once and another staff member heard it another time, but soon there will be a story, and so it's bringing those out and recording those, so law enforcement and the building team and administration can understand what is happening. If you see something, say something. You can report any suspicious activity to the New York State Terrorism Tips Line or the Buffalo Police Department tip line. And of course, if something is immediate and in progress, you need to call 911. Creating a safe school environment is an ongoing process. As threat events continue, security response will also evolve. Prepare your school to evolve as well, and be part of the process. School safety is everyone's responsibility. So prepare yourself, prepare your classroom, and make sure that you are communicating with your administration, school security, if you have concerns. I want to thank you so much for your time and attention today. My contact information is on the screen. Please feel free to reach out to me, or you can always reach out to Chief Lark and she can get in contact with me. Thank you.